CRO is not something that you do on a side. It will always get deprioritized versus other tasks. You need dedication, both from the resource point of view, the targets point of view. You need to set clear numerical targets, communicate them clearly, and know what you need to basically be able to deliver on them and communicate that to your management.
Looking like a baddie, I show up and make them stop. Wanna know my name so badly, cause I run this whole block. Flip my hair, move my head, show the world I'm royalty. When I walk by, they be taking bows, cause they know I'm the queen, yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Luiza de Lange. I'm a CRO lead at Teletube. Thank you, Experimentation, for the opportunity to share my thoughts as a part of this conference. Today, I'm going to talk about how to build successful experimentation programs from ground up. But before we go there, just a little bit more about myself. I'm a die-hard Lewis Hamilton fan, and I'm really happy about his recent form and pole position in Hungary. I've been around for more than 10 years. I've worked both on the client and agency sides. On the client side, I've spent many years at Electrolux, and now I'm working at Teletube. And on the agency side, I worked for Precis Digital. I'm also a strong believer in Trinity approach. And no, this is not a religious association. It's a concept introduced by Avinash Kaushik that I will cover later on. As said, since I'm currently working at Teletube, let's just briefly look at what Teletube does. Our ambition is to create best connected life for our consumers. This way, we would enable the society of unlimited possibilities. Teletube is a major telecom operator present in Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. We employ roughly around 4,500 employees, and we serve more than 9 million subscribers. We offer three main products: mobile and fixed telephony, mobile and fixed broadband services, as well as entertainment. Within that, we have TV and streaming. Within our group, we have two main brands, Convic and Teletube. So after this brief introduction, let us dive into today's topic of building experimentation programs from ground up. But what actually is experimentation? Experimentation is all about performance, improving the performance of individual parts of the site in order to achieve and optimize an overarching goal. This goal is often conversion, hence the term conversion rate optimization. However, it's possible to measure performance in other metrics like click-through rates, revenue, you name it. So what are we doing it for? Why are we experimenting? In my opinion, the biggest reason why I optimize websites and apps is to improve the consumer experience online. I've been myself a victim of a frustrating online experience. For example, when buying that perfect dress, at midnight, just about go to bed on my mobile phone, and it's last minutes of promotion ending that day. And while in cart, the loading wheel is just spinning and spinning. So whether it's technical difficulties, unclear UX, missing payment methods, we really need to listen to our consumer and their needs, as they devote their most precious resource to us, which is their time. So what are we doing it for? Another reason why we're doing it, and this one speaks a little bit more effectively to our managers and management boards, is to increase revenue. According to Optimizely, out of 800 companies that they interviewed, 73% increased their digital revenue by 5 or more % due to experimentation. So better consumer experience and more revenue both sound good. But why do we experiment? Maybe some of you just entered the workforce and have management that bases all their decisions on data. And in such case, that is fantastic. However, when I started in 2012, that certainly was not the case. We currently see a shift of organizations being more and more data-driven, and experimentation is a great driver of just that. We experiment to reduce the guesswork and make better decisions. Harvard Business School analyzed the data of 100,000 website experiments. and only 1 in 10 produced a winning result. That's hundreds of thousands of changes, which people thought they seemed like a good idea, and yet 9 out of 10 didn't work. In other words, everything we do on the websites without testing has a 90% chance of being a waste of money, or worse, could negatively impact the revenue. So the reason why we test is because we want to reduce the risk. So if you look at the upper chart, without experimentation, your chances are that 90% of what you release fails. And then with experimentation on the chart below, you can see that that risk is not zero, it's not nothing. And that's because, unfortunately, in most companies today, we do not test everything yet. And that's obviously where the risk comes from. So by introducing online control experiments, we minimize the risk of releasing a change that can be potentially negative. We, of course, also experiment to be more customer-centric. Let the consumer decide and tell us what they like. And quoting Ron Kohavi, A/B testing is the best scientific way to establish causality with high probability. You're able to detect small changes that are harder to detect with other techniques, such as changes over time, for example. So hopefully I gave you a little bit of reasons why we should test, but what gives me the mandate to talk about this? Well, I've done it twice. So when I was introduced to CRO at Electrolux in 2018, we ran 2 tests a year. We had no development resources and no analysts were devoted to experimentation. When management challenged us to achieve a target of 10 tests a year in 2019, I jumped all in. In 2019, we got a dedicated CRO resource. To start with, it was 50% FTE, and then we changed it to a full-time employee. After half a year, we added a dedicated developer resource. In 2020, we were fully operational, had a smooth process, responsibilities were set in place, and we introduced personalization, so product recommendation algorithms. By the time I was leaving by mid-2021, the team has launched 51 experiments, so I'm assuming that by the end of that year, they managed to release around 100. So when we look at Teletube's journey, when I joined last year, we had no development resources, and the team ran some tests using a web editor, and unfortunately, all of those turned out to be insignificant. Towards the end of the year, we got dedicated developer resource, and so far for this year, we managed to launch 24 tests. That's just for Teletube run. So I'm confident that by the end of the year, we will at least manage to run 30. And together with our sister brand, Convic, it's going to be around 70. I also added here numbers for 2024 and 2025. Obviously, these are just rough predictions, and it shows our ambition for growth. And if this is not testament enough, we just won Experimentation Culture Award as a team. We are very proud of this achievement, as anyone globally could enter the competition. And this year there were 69 entries, and we competed against the likes of Heineken from the Netherlands or US team ACLU. So we learned why we should experiment, what are we experimenting for, and why am I talking about it. So let's then deep dive into my 5 key pillars for successful experimentation program. I hope you will enjoy what I've prepared for you today. So the first focus area is all about the people. Which resources and skills do you need to run A/B test? Second focus area, we'll look at what tools out there can help us and how can we make the most out of them. Then we will cover the process, roles, and responsibilities. And no program can be successful without communication, which is at the heart of it. So we will deep dive into that as well. And lastly, what I believe is very important, how do we, as CRO experts, continuously stay up to date with the latest? How to ensure ongoing education and that source of motivation? Where are we taking our inspiration from? So let's start then with the first pillar, skill set. When I started working with experimentation in 2018, I quickly learned that there are 5 key roles, responsibilities that are must-have in experimentation process. That's going to be your analyst, the statistical expert, that is responsible for all the mathematical sciences that drive A, B, C, N tests. And that's basically a person that does all of the analysis. Then there's your designers that are familiar with the brand and design guidelines. The developers, so the coders, product owners that have the overview of the full development backlog and can see what are the new functionalities coming in that should be tested. And lastly, project manager that looks at coordination of all the tasks between the different funnels, your purchase funnels on the websites, and just making sure that you're progressing with your experimentation program and maturing as an organization. And based on my experience, the analyst and project manager start as one person, and then as experimentation programs grows, that might change and split into two separate roles. So these are the 5 must-haves. There are, of course, a lot of other stakeholders like, sales managers, content managers, management, just to name the few. But without these 5 or 4, as I mentioned, if the analyst is starting the same as project manager, in my opinion, you cannot run a successful experimentation program without these. CRO is not something that you do on a side. It will always get deprioritized versus other tasks. You need dedication, both from the resource point of view, the targets point of view. You need to set clear numerical targets, communicate them clearly, and know what you need to basically be able to deliver on them and communicate that to your management.
This is Romo Santiago from Experimentation. Every week we share interviews with and conference sessions by our favorite conversion rate optimizers from around the world. So if you like this video, smash that like button and consider subscribing. It helps us a bunch. Now back to the episode.
So when I mentioned in 2019, when the management team from Electrax came to me and asked to deliver 10 tests a year, the achiever that I am, I jumped right on it and wanted to understand what not only to do to deliver upon these expectations, but how can I exceed them? The team at this stage had multiple analysts, and they were both responsible for analysis and CRO. And I quickly realized, without having that devoted time in the analyst job description, so clearly, prioritizing CRO versus anything else that they do, it basically the tests were not happening. It was not working as I wanted. So even when we had 50% allocation, it's just, whatever analysis was in the backlog got prioritized over CRO. And we haven't achieved the results we wanted. So only after fully dedicating one resource to experimentation, the machine started running. Similarly, I learned very quickly that you will not succeed without the developer resource. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. According to Optimizely, development resources are crucial to the long-term success of experimentation programs. You can see here on the chart the relationship between the number of lines of code and the significant uplift on the primary metric of your variant of the test. So basically, the more you code, the more successful your tests are. I was lucky that one of my analysts had coding experience when I started working with experimentation. And at the beginning, he took on the developer's work to code the variants. But very quickly, we realized that having someone that is familiar with the website's code is critical. Knowing what you need and communicating that clearly to your management is a part of your job. So you need to be aware of what it is that you need to be able to request it. And CRO process will not be successful without a developer. Maybe some out there might disagree with me here, but you can, to a certain extent, run tests in Visual Editor. But in my opinion, CRO process will not be successful without a developer. And not every developer is the same. Their familiarity with the code base might be different. Their level of experience might be different. And lastly, they might be more or less creative to look for solutions to deliver what we want to test. And therefore, they deliver different results. I've worked with many developers in the past, and even when they have the similar capacity, they're 100% dedicated. One would deliver 2 tests a month and the other 6. It is also very hard to find quality resources. Recruiters are literally fighting for developers out there. Therefore, it's increasingly important to focus on building capability where there is a will. So train, learn, educate those resources. And remember, appreciate your developers. Your experimentation program is going to be as good as your planning skills. This is something I heard in another conference, and I remember thinking to myself, that's damn right. So as a CRO expert, it's not enough to look at the current. You really need to think strategically into the future, look at the full architecture, landscape you're working with, and plan ahead, communicate that plan, and then execute on it. Another aspect to experimentation is utilization of available tools to maximize automation of tasks. It's absolutely critical for CRO specialists to have a good understanding of the marketing technology of different tools out there. There's this overlap, this emerging opportunity when we combine different data sources. Avinash Kashik created this Trinity mindset. Its goal is to power generation of actionable insights. There are many different ways to understand the experience of customers on your website. Within the outcomes, we would have metrics such as revenue, traffic, conversion rates. You would achieve that with tools such as Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, and the like. Then we have the behavior area with clickstream data, interactions, click density analysis, session recordings, heat maps, scroll rates. And then we have the whole research, and that's where your customer satisfaction, your A/B testing, usability test, voice of consumer would sit with tools such as Qualtrics or Get Feedback. So what is important is that all these experience methodologies are decked against one single purpose, and that's getting companies to listen to the voice of consumer. So hopefully now it makes a little bit more sense when I'm saying that I'm a strong believer in Trinity approach. So as mentioned, we have measurement tools, experimentation tools, session recording and heat map tools, and then voice of consumer as well as project management tools. They have different purposes and work in tandem. So your measurement tool is going to analyze inbound and outbound traffic, and basically is going to give you a basic understanding of on-site behavior. That will be complemented with your session recording and heat maps tool that give you more in-depth understanding of the site behavior based on heat maps and session recordings. Experimentation tool enables you to run A/B tests and personalization based on audiences out there. Voice of consumer tool basically enables you to gather valuable qualitative feedback from your consumers directly via different surveys. And project management tool can give you an overview of all your A/B tests, regardless of which stage they're on, whether they're in backlog, running, or completed. So on top of that, of course, we have a lot of other tools. We have design tools like InVision, Figma. We might have tag management systems, CDPs, product information management system, digital asset management system, and much more. So this is definitely not an exhaustive list, but a good CRO expert needs to know all these tools and understand the relationship between them. So I've created a little cheat sheet for you, and let's just go through them. So within the measurement tools, we have Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, their main competitor, and then we have very popular recently Matom and Piwik Pro, which are a part of the same company. And then we have within experimentation tools, and I believe you should know all of these, as Google optimizes sunsetting this year. So since this was a tool that had the biggest market share out there, you're most likely, either you have found already a replacement or are looking for one. So we have the French companies A/B Testing Chameleon. We obviously have Optimizely, which is a big player out there, VWO, and Growthbook, which is has very interesting proposition. Then we have within the session recordings tool, Content Square, Full Story, Mouseflow, Glassbox, Decibel, Hotjar, and Content Square are the part of the same company. And SmartLook has a kind of dual functionality because their proposition is to replace both measurement tool and the session recordings. Some vendors opted for that approach. You'll see another example in a second. So within the voice of consumer service, we have SurveyMonkey and Get Feedback that are also part of the same company under Symphony Technology Group. Then we have Qualtrics, Conductrix, which in their proposition offers both experimentation and voice of consumer. So that's a different combination. Then we have Marker.io and Typeform. And lastly, for project management, you might be using Airtable and Jira. These are the most popular. But then there are also tools built within experimentation vendor platforms, like Optimizely, for example. So all of them create this marketing technology landscape that we need to navigate in. And it's not enough to just have these pieces of the puzzle in place. You need to ensure to be able to get the most out of your tools to build integrations between them. And there's a reason why software as a service companies use the number of integrations as their selling point. There are many ways in which you can connect your tech stack, and some examples of integrations can be between your measurement tool and your experimentation tool. This is where you send the control and variant IDs from experimentation tool to your measurement tool. So for example, from Google Optimize to Google Analytics for a deep dive analysis then in your measurement tool. Another one could be to send control and variant IDs from your experimentation tool to a session recording tool for deep dive analysis. So in this case, from Optimize, you might be sending your control and variant IDs to Content Square, where you can look at heat maps side by side and look at the session recordings for your variant. How did the consumer navigate in the change that you have introduced? And another example of integrations could be between session recording tool and voice of consumer, where you can send a trigger from voice of consumer tool to your session recording tool to ensure that you capture that session where the consumer has most likely struggled with. So most of the feedback we receive via voice of consumer is negative. So you would want to make sure that you capture that session, because that gives you a little bit more understanding to the comment the consumer leaves. And equally, you can connect your voice of consumer tool with measurement tool, where you would send unique response ID for the consumer that answered the survey to be able to stitch it together with a session ID and track users' path on the website to better understand the struggles that this consumer faced. This list can go on and on until you have utilized all integrations between all your tools. Now, just be careful, because not always all makes sense. So just make sure you know how you intend to use the data before you spend the time building sometimes custom integrations. So basically, just make sure you build what you actually are going to use. So the third pillar is having a bulletproof process, as well as clear roles and responsibilities. When we look at the CRO process or CRO framework, in all honesty, it doesn't really matter how your process looks like. I've seen a lot of iterations of this one, and as long as it's a circular process, it's ongoing, then in my opinion, it's fine. Very often, these processes involve stages such as ideation, where you create your hypothesis you want to test, then experimentation, so you're planning, executing your test, and then recommendation, where you do the analysis of the test and you communicate what is your recommendation as analyst. So what is your recommendation for the action that is to follow that test? And of course, then is the decision or next step. Sometimes the test can be insignificant, so you might want to change your hypothesis, tweak it slightly, and run it again. So that's where that loop comes from. And of course, even if you have tested something 1 year, that doesn't mean that consumer expectations haven't changed from 1 year to another. So you need to continuously test even things that you have tested before. So when you look in detail at the process, there are three very important points in that journey, but let's just briefly go through it. So whatever hypothesis you create should be based on data, and that very often is an exploratory analysis you've done, but it can be honestly a source of multiple types of data. It can be a usability test. It can be feedback from consumer directly from your survey. It can be previous tests. So there's really no limit to where the hypothesis can be or what the hypothesis can be inspired based on, as long as it's based on data. Then you create your hypothesis. Those are then scored against each other together, most likely with product owner and the developer, where you there are different scoring models out there, and based on those you prioritize your tests. Then once you prioritize the tests you want to run, you start planning them, you specify and define metrics, you make sure that your designers deliver the templates that you want to code. And once you have done that, this is the very first step that is important. You need a formal hypothesis sign-off. So your product owner needs to approve that this is a test we want to run, as they have the overview of everything else happening on the website. And once you get that, of course, you can proceed with your development. You can brief your developer and they can deliver on the variant. And as soon as you QA your test and you release it, you can and you have to communicate that test start. So all stakeholders from, product owner that is fully aware that this is going to start, to customer operations that might not be involved in the full process in the core team, they need to know that the test started in case they have any questions about the changes on the website. So obviously then you execute and monitor your test, and as soon as it's finished, you summarize it and make recommendation based on the results you got. And then the most important is to take action on that result. So to clearly communicate roles and responsibilities in your process, you can introduce RACI framework. Using RACI, you define responsibilities between those core stakeholders. You suggest who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. RACI would be unique for each organization, so it's not going to be the same from one company to another. The availability, skill set, and motivation of particular resources might differ. I hope this will be helpful for you to divide responsibilities in your organization. And when talking about the process and planning ahead, as mentioned before, what is useful is having experimentation maturity model at hand to always have the next step in mind and to start building blocks that will help you get there. I've come across this one relatively recently, and I know I've been living under a rock, but this helped me immensely once I found it in identifying where do we want to go next as organization. So let us jump into the fourth pillar, communication. When building experimentation program, communication is key. You need to ensure you have an ongoing dialogue with your key stakeholders. I've suggested a couple of meeting ceremonies here that we will go through. I base these on big organizations that I've been a part of, and the recurrence and number of these forums should be adjusted based on company size. So in this example, we would have weekly syncs with your core team. And those are the resources I mentioned before, the core stakeholders of experimentation. Then we would have monthly forum that is open to everyone. And your goal is to grow that forum in members and entice people to get engaged and contribute. Then you would have your weekly sync with the CRO sub team. So if you have more than one analyst deploying tests, this enables you to discuss more architectural pieces. So tool enablement, the integrations, and also if you have multiple brands, that allows you the alignment across brands. Lastly, you want to be a pioneer of testing across the whole organization. So regardless of the platform, bring all the folks working with testing together. Let them learn from each other and inspire each other. And this is really where the magic happens. Remember, all test results are good results. We are often forced to directly prove our return on investment when working with CRO, and sometimes it's very, very tricky. as we primarily reduce the risk, as I mentioned before. So you need to be able to estimate not only how much additional revenue you brought with all the winning hypothesis, but also how much you saved the company from spending incorrectly. And as in Harvard Business School study, and many organizations have also shared before, the win rate of hypothesis is only around 10%. So no matter how much you think it's a no-brainer, how much research you've done, or how many competitors are doing it, sometime, and more often than you might think, experiment ideas just simply fail. Etsy admitted that almost everything that they test fails, and other big organizations are claiming win rates between 10 to 30%. And the last fifth pillar of successful experimentation program is continuous education and motivation. We're all different, and different things inspire and motivate us. For me, these are some that work very well, so I would like to share these with you. I've divided them into 4 categories. Books, articles, white papers, and LinkedIn posts are one category, basically anything written. And then we have conversational education, so either one-to-one with your mentors, via presentations, conferences, seminars, or in close, safe communities where you can ask them anything. So for the books, I cannot recommend enough the trustworthy online controlled experiments. It's like a Bible to me. It's a bit technical, but very solid resource. I also really like benchmark white papers. Some of the vendors, like Content Square, use the data they collect to, in aggregate number, provide a benchmark to work towards. I think it's a source of fantastic indicators. You know, we're very often asked, what is a standard conversion rate or scroll rate for our industry? And well, they have the answer. When it comes to the CRO community, they have a fantastic, helpful, knowledgeable, and fun, most importantly, people. And there are really numbers of them. So make sure you reach out and remember that no question is stupid enough. Just this year, I've learned so much from the network of people around me. It's absolutely amazing. Then we have conferences. So of course, the Experimentation that you're participating in right now. But then we have Super Week, which is a week in Hungary with the best of the best in the industry. We have measure camps in all the respective countries. We have Conversion Hotel in the Netherlands that I'm really much looking forward to. Conversion Jam, which is Conversionistas Nordic specific conference. And the one that I particularly like is the Women in Tech. There are also a number of valuable vendor conferences. For example, Content Square has fantastic content, and most experimentation vendors have conferences. Optimizely organized recently a nice event in Fotografiska, and Convex by VWO takes place in September, where I will also be speaking. So the conferences don't always have to be about CRO. Sometimes it's good to just get an insight into a bigger picture and get inspired. So for that, I cannot recommend Women in Tech enough. And when it comes to communities, these are the 3 I would like to mention. So we have Test and Learn community, Women in Experimentation, and CRO Nordics Slack channel created by Marianne and Karl Muszyński. So that was all I had for you today. I hope you have enjoyed the content and do not hesitate to reach out. Have a lovely rest of the day, everyone, and keep on testing.
This is Romo Santiago from Experimentation. Every week we share interviews with and conference sessions by our favorite conversion rate optimizers from around the world. So if you like this video, smash that like button and consider subscribing.